But let's get into it, shall we, right now. Joining us fresh from the picket line, a Northland emergency doctor, it is Dr. Gary Payinda. Gary, sir, welcome to the show again. It's been such a long time since we had you.
Yeah, nice to be here. Thanks for having me back. You guys aren't sick of this stuff yet, huh?
Nope. Well, it's a double-edged sword that. We're not sick of speaking to you. I think everyone's a bit sick of the idea of what this government's doing to things like doctors and nurses and patients. So, however you want to talk about it. Gary, I thought what we could do to start off with, I've got a bunch of stuff here, including some of your own footage, your own photos and stuff. But I think what we might do is we might just start off, because Stuff did a 3-minute piece on this. I think what we can do is actually watch the Stuff article, the 3 News article on the protests today, and then we'll go from there. Everyone down for that? Everyone down for that.
That's good.
So let's have a look at the item of Stuff tonight, which is covering the senior doctors and others strikes around the country today.
To the day's other news, thousands of senior doctors around the country went on strike for 24 hours at midnight over the stalled pay dispute. Health New Zealand says more than 4,000 procedures had to be postponed as a result of today's action. But the Doctors' Union says that figure pales against the number of procedures that have to be delayed every day as a result of chronic staff shortages. Adam Hollingworth reports.
It's the first time senior doctors have been on a 24-hour strike. They walked off the job at midnight. Some clinics are closed, but hospitals and EDs remain open today. The doctors say they've been offered 1.5%. That's below inflation. They're demanding 12% plus an increase to cover the rising costs of medical education. Health New Zealand, Te Whatu Ora, says there's no spare cash.
Oh, look, there's no more money in our coffers. We've as I say.
Sorry, little side note here. I think if you're going to come and tell a group of people there's not enough money, you probably shouldn't wear that jacket. Like, you know what I mean? Doesn't that scream of, Kim.com, what he would wear as leisure wear to an event? It's like, I'm just saying, positioning statement.
My understanding of this gentleman is that he actually owns or has set up Canopy private cancer centers, which is a huge chain of oncology centers. Now, I could be wrong if anyone knows the correct, most current story, but that is my understanding, is that is part of his claim to fame. Where essentially in the public system, you might get a free infusion of your chemotherapy. In private, that can be $1,500. So he's got some beautiful clothing. You'd have to agree, Pat. I mean,
I mean, it's interesting tonight. We're going to watch a clip in a little while with Nicola Willis, and she does look like an extra from My Cousin Vinny as well. I don't know why we're throwing shade on people's clothing tonight, but Cyber Goblin just comes out and says that I'm not fair. He saved money by making that jacket from his auntie's curtain. So fair enough. I withdraw and apologise, and we'll keep going with the story.
We've sort of put our best foot forward. It's clearly not enough.
They say the offers amount to increases of between...
It's actually interesting. I mean, the dude in charge is going, it's clearly not enough, i.e. he's saying we haven't offered enough. That's actually a really interesting little... I wonder if Mr. Luxon would be happy to hear him say we haven't offered enough, and because one would imply from that we need to offer more. I'm just saying it's an interesting little perspective. We'll keep going on the story.
Between $8,000 and $29,000 on a senior doctor's base salary.
Most of us don't have to train for 15 to 20 years in order to do the job that we're currently in. We don't make life and death decisions, most of us, on a daily basis.
Health New Zealand put a credible offer on the table. Unfortunately, the union decided not to put that to its members. They should have. Instead, they decided to continue with the strike, which is causing disruption of care to patients.
The unions say they are also in an international marketplace, and senior doctors earn much more in Australia than they do here. This strike is as much about pay as it is about the shortfall of senior medical officers. The doctors here say that's around 25% around the country, but is as bad as 45% in places like Gisborne. Health New Zealand says that figure is closer to 10% across the country.
This means that the remaining senior doctors are having to be the glue holding together a broken health system. they're having to desperately try to provide increasing levels of patient demand and need.
Recruiting doctors is tough, and it's a competitive market. But I think people come to work for more than just money. I think people come to work for the value of the service they do, the people they work for.
Health New Zealand estimates 4,300 planned procedures will have to be postponed due to the strike.
There are too many New Zealanders already waiting too long, and what happened today is not going to assist with the challenges of getting on top of those wait lists.
I want to apologise to patients who are inconvenienced, but I think we need to keep that.
Doctors inconvenience patients by 24 hours. Doctors apologise. Government inconveniences patients by weeks, months, years, and they're like, it's the doctor's fault. Just check that out, people. Just see where those have come from.
Number in proportion to the many, many thousands. I think we're somewhere in the 70, 80,000 people awaiting surgical procedures who are just waiting one day more.
In the latest development, there'll be what's called a facilitation case conference tomorrow. The Employment Relations Authority will talk to both sides about the next steps to take.
There you go. All right. The first thing is, Gary, I mean, obviously it's not going to be quite just a 24-hour delay for some patients because they couldn't get it today. So they'll book in the next opening, which might be in a week or 3 days or whatever. But I think the point that's come out in the last couple of days from the people speaking on and behalf of the doctors is, yeah, we are unfortunately having to make an imposition on some of these patients for a short delay. What the government's doing at the moment in these hospitals is inconvenience these patients with huge delays. I mean, you were talking about years with gynecological services in Northland. And I think us rodeo clowns, us morons in the public are starting to understand that, which I think probably gives more support to what the doctors are doing. Your experiences from today?
Oh, today was an incredible day. We had a good turnout, given that the forecast was for absolutely torrential rain. We knew that we wouldn't be getting the numbers that ideally we would have wanted, and then we were quite happy to see decent numbers. There's about 60 docs and supporters in front of the hospital, and then a peak of about 140 people at the PSA. This was the beginning. This is actually 20 minutes before the start of the rally. If you keep going through my photos, you'll see like it builds. This is just us setting up the tent and the first few signs. But yeah, 140 people at the PSA rally in Tauriwa Park. And yeah, a good turnout all around. Midwives, doctors, nurses, healthcare assistants, people that work as radiation techs. I mean, there's all kinds.
I suspect as well, because we saw it in Dunedin, that you wouldn't have had any, you can never say 100%, but there would have been nothing but support from the public driving past and in the area. Yeah,
the number or percentage of cars that were beeping their horns was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to argue with we need to hire more nurses. We need to make a better health system that doesn't keep 200,000 people waiting for a first specialist appointment. I mean, like, think about these numbers. So Simeon is happy to blame us for harming patients whose day was postponed today, and it is horrible. If I was waiting a year for a surgery, I'd feel horrendous if it went even one more day. But you have to understand that the kinds of problems that they've wrought on the service means that, as I said, 200,000 people are waiting to see a specialist for the first time. These are people who, are a bit desperate to get an answer to whatever the problem is: cancer, kidney failure, liver failure, whatever. And they're just going to be waiting an interminably long time. And there's no plan for really fixing this. I want you guys to understand that it's a readily solvable problem. Like, I think yesterday you asked, is there a low-hanging fruit? If I could, do magic and, make one thing be better. To some extent, you don't even have to necessarily hire doctors and correct 100% of the problem, but you sure as hell have to hire nurses, because without nurses there to do the actual patient care, it makes the doctor's job infinitely harder. And you make the nurse's job easier by hiring healthcare assistants so that your registered nurses aren't spending, they're university educated professionals who have to spend a lot of their time making beds and cleaning up things and pushing patients around and checking if this or that is done. Because our HCA staffing, a healthcare assistant used to be called an orderly back in the old days. We have nowhere near enough of these people, and it doesn't break the bank to hire them. And yet you can probably double your nurses' effectiveness if they're if the repetitive duties are taken away from them and they can just focus on the actual nursing.
Yeah. So you give.
So yeah, I mean. No,
I'm sure the nurses would do anything, go above and beyond all the time. But if we're paying them to be nurses, we want to pay them to be nurses, and we can get other people to do those other jobs, which will help them be nurses better and be more effective. It's part of nursing.
Christopher Luxon's pretend business world, mumbo jumbo of saying back office workers, right? The back office worker, there's no back office. There's just a hospital and the people that keep that hospital going. Now, I might use my hands to examine your abdomen, but that doesn't mean that the people that are supporting that work are not completely as essential. So the person getting medical records, the person looking after your data safety, who's been fired now. They just announced, I think 2 days ago, 1,500 firings or disestablishments of roles just in IT services. And I don't know in what universe that is a back office if we have computer systems that are archaic. Like I was reading some of the comments online of people who've worked in the health system, and they were basically from IT saying, if you want to step back in time and be immensely frustrated, go to work as an IT professional in health. You will be working in some cases on programs that are still running Windows 98. And they said, you don't understand the level of antiquation that we're dealing with. So yeah, it's a lot of things. And on the back of that, to then say we're cutting data and IT staff by 50%, or we're eliminating the IT revitalization for the nation. They had plans and had started on the work of unifying all 20 DHBs into one IT system. That's gone. That's a memory now. So yeah, I'm super sorry that we struck today, and the strike is going to go on for a couple more hours. It's horrible for patients. It sucks, but the alternative is having departments that are understaffed by 10 to 40%, and that's not really good for patients either.
Yeah. We were looking at some of your photos, and I took them down while we were talking because I couldn't go past this one. I mean, it's got to have some. We have to give some credit to this sign, Chewie. Surely, I mean, one of the best signs of the day. Save health, dump brown. Yeah, we get it. We're picking up what you're putting down. I like that one. Chewie, sir, jump in. Any words?
Yeah. Look, I think. Again, Simeon is just hammering the point that, hey, look, we made an offer. I'm not going to mention it, but we made an offer. And this nonsense that the union then has to present it to its membership. There would have already been a discussion over what the membership was happy with.
Yeah.
So he's inventing a process that doesn't exist.
Simeon was just awesome. Like I just admire his gumption and his ability to really say anything without shame. I mean, it takes a special kind of person to do that. So he one of the things he said was he wished that the offer had been put to members. I mean, what did I need to know about the offer? I needed to know that for the average senior medical officer, Simeon's offer would be a rise of 0.77%, so less than 1%. And I think if you're dealing with something that's actually negative, way below the level of even inflation, which is 2.5% now, you don't need to take another vote to realize that the people have spoken. We spoke the first time around, right? We voted 86% of the people, of the doctors, I should say the public hospital doctors, the public medical specialists, 86% voted in favor of the strike. And Simeon said, oh, it's more like 50%, because obviously everyone doesn't vote on something. So I looked something up. I went back to 2023 and I looked up Simeon's election results. That man was only voted in by 58% of his voting populace, and he's like, how dare he criticize an 86% vote? Our vote was overwhelming in support of the strike, and yeah, and then I had some friends forward me. Oh my gosh, I don't know if you have this, Pat. I emailed you some of it, but it's just surreal. You can go onto the expenses of parliamentarians and find out how much they're using their credit cards for, and what they're being reimbursed for. And then you can go to a different site, and we should maybe put up links to it if you can, of the actual pay that these people are getting. And so Simeon, I can't remember off the top of my head, but you can probably find it later. I think it was around $320,000 a year this man is making. And remember that our first year consultant, who has graduated from training at age 32, so 32 years of age, yeah, there's some good stuff. So this is Simeon's money, $320,000 as a salary, superannuation of 20%.
Shit.
Right? So he's getting 64,000 in the superannuation each year. Pretty incredible. You know, he was saying that doctors are these horrendously overpaid people, but this man's getting an accommodation allowance of $56,000 a year. Like, where is he living?
You're up to about 440,000 there just for those three things.
And then keep going, and you see the expenses claimed. And this is across a year, 4 quarters, I guess, 22,000, 28,000, 27,000, 22,000.
So
this is an extraordinary amount of money. And if we just went off the base salary, so how much does that add up to? I don't know. So like,
it's about 500,000 because there's about 320. Okay. That's about 100 and. That's about 100 and what's that? 120. So that's three. So that's four. So that's 440. So it's $540,000. 540.
You could hire 2 surgeons, so new surgeons out of training, at the same age as Simeon, right? So he's 34. These surgeons would be 32, probably 33 or 34 if they did subspecializations. So same age as him, and he's making twice as much. Now, I'm not even necessarily begrudging the parliamentarians their money, but the sheer gut-wrenching gall of this small man, and I don't mean that as a pejorative against his height or stature, I mean his soul, his intellect, and his heart are small and shriveled and stunted. The gall of this man to be raking in what, 500-ish thousand, and I'm sure there's more benefits there that we don't see, travel or whatever, and yet to understand that he's making twice as much as a new surgeon or anesthetist or intensive care doctor would make is pretty rich. I mean, don't you think? Like, what's your reaction when I tell you we could have 2 surgeons or 1 Simeon Brown?
Yeah. Easily 2 surgeons if you include the expenses.
Easily 2, maybe 3.
Yeah, because what is it, about 180 to start with? So that's actually 3. 180 times 3 will be 540. Yeah, that's 3.
Yeah. So yeah, he wants us to just be quiet, and it's like David Seymour said. You know, doctors are muppets that need to be put back in their box. Simeon wants the same. He wants us to shut up, but I don't think he understands what he's gotten into now. He is reviled. His government's health policies, I'll put it even more broadly, are reviled by patients, beneficiaries, pensioners, workers of all kinds, and especially health workers. So I mean, I don't know what he's thinking, but he is really destroying his ability to get the support of the public. I mean, they were out there honking, and it wasn't like it was every car, but it was like every fourth car, every fifth car was honking for us. There's a ton of support. People understand that their doctors are being forced into private and forced abroad. And they can understand that you wouldn't want to work in a department that is missing 30% of the doctors, and you have to pick up the slack for that. There's no way around it. And you can do that for a while. All of us can do that for a while, but you don't want to do it forever. You don't. I'll tell you my experience. I don't want to walk into every single patient's room at the 3 or 4 hour mark or 5 hour, sometimes worse, and say, yeah, I'm Gary Payinda. I'm an emergency doctor. I'm very sorry that it took me 4.5 hours to see you today. That is not something I want to do day after day after day. It's not a good feeling. It's not right. And so today someone asked me, is there a tipping point, Gary? Is there a point at which things break? And what I had to tell them is we understand from the international medical literature that the UK did an amazing study comparing death rates for patients that were waiting 8 hours or longer for admission to the ward. So I've seen you as an emergency doctor. You've got heart failure or a pneumonia or sepsis or whatever. You need to get admitted. You're sick, but there's no bed for you. And so you can't go upstairs. So we put you somewhere, either in that ED cubicle where you block up the cubicle for hours. Other patients can't get cared for there, or we park you somewhere else. Increasingly, sometimes that may even mean a corridor. Your care suffers. You don't get the antibiotics you need. You don't get the heart failure treatment. You don't get the specialists to review you and decide what the next step is. And if you do that to 52 patients, you will increase deaths by 1. So you can just sort of do the maths yourself. There's not a tipping point at which the inadequacies of our health system are just going to collapse in on itself. It doesn't work that way. There will be people who suffer demonstrable harm all along the system, and they will just increase in number. And so let's say it's you going to the hospital. Now, maybe the first 52 times you go will be fine. But what matters is the experience of that 53rd person who has died an unnecessary death. And that's a correlation. It's not causation, but we know that this is killing people. And we know that there are people having heart attacks in the waiting room, not getting antibiotics for sepsis until it's profoundly late. And of course, that has an outcome on their hospitalization and on their subsequent death rate. So there's not a tipping point at which it all fails, unless you are that one that it is failing on that day. And then your tipping point is 100%, right?
Yeah.
So that's the thing that bothers us. And and that's why we're striking. And this is the thing I would like to let Simeon Brown know with plenty of advance warning. We are taking all of the public service workers with us. It will be the nurses. It will be the healthcare assistants and everybody else in the society. We're going to rally the police to step up, New Zealand Defence Force, everyone that is getting screwed right now and is set to be screwed even worse in the coming year, because Nicola Willis announced that she's going to hack it to the bone, right? She's going to pull out another 1.1 billion or more with this new budget. And in this all, I just want to be clear that the government had the money, and they chose to spend it elsewhere, right? They took 12 billion in debt to give $18 billion in tax cuts to people who didn't need it. The average pensioner, according to Grey Power, New Zealand, is going to get $2.50 a week of those tax cuts, right? But we know that the 300 biggest landlords in the country are estimated to get $1 million apiece to help them defray the cost of their mortgage interest, right? To allow it to be deductible. That was a decision the government made. and the money is gone. The money is not there for other things because so very much of it went away. 2.9 billion to landlords, 14.7 billion to tax cuts that went largely to the top sectors of society. So it's really rotten. And yeah, to get doctors rallying is a big deal, but we're taking it far further. This is going to trickle and spread and leach throughout the public services, and eventually further than that, because patients are sick of it too.
I know we said beforehand, we were talking before we came on, that you're sort of leaving the negotiations up to the unions and stuff, but I do want to play 60 seconds this morning from Nicola Willis in her My Cousin Vinny costume. Even the gold chain says it all, because she makes it sound like you guys are being difficult with these negotiations. And I know that's not the case, and I don't want to get your blood pressure up either more than it is, but I just want to play this and then ask you the question about it.
Sure.
Well, look, I think we value our doctors. Obviously, they do an incredibly important job. But of course, we're disappointed that thousands of New Zealand patients are going to have their procedures cancelled as a result of this strike. And we'd really like to see doctors back at the negotiating table, in particular because in this case, they haven't taken the offer that the government's made to their members. The union has just decided to strike. And we think this can be negotiated, it can be resolved, and we worry about all those New Zealanders who are now having scans and procedures delayed because that's their health at stake.
Do we value them enough, though? They said that actually it's not the doctors in Australia that are striking. They're the ones that have chosen to stay. They're the ones that are striking. Do we value them enough?
Well, we do value them. In this pay round, we've offered pay rises of up to 9.5% for those new specialist doctors. And we've also offered payments of up to $25,000 for those doctors choosing to work in really hard to staff parts of the country. So Health New Zealand, I think, have put forward an offer in good faith, recognising the really important role that doctors do in our hospital. They've also been working hard to recruit more doctors. I heard the people on the show talking about those concerns. There's been more than 200 hired so far, around 1,700 additional nurses, and we've actually put in funding to train more doctors as well. So these are issues that we take really seriously, and we're putting our best foot forward in the negotiation.
We've already kind of covered off the idea about the unions not presenting the offer. I didn't say this then, but when you sell your house and you say to your agent, I'm not going to even consider an offer under $520,000.
Exactly.
And they get an offer for $500,000, the real estate agent doesn't present that offer to you. So let's put that to the side. I mean, hearing that interview, you may not obviously have the knowledge of the negotiations going on between the union and them, but she's making it sound like 9.5%. That seems pretty fair in this day and age. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The 9.5% is the highest number, and it only refers to a couple years when the people are first getting out. And the reason they probably targeted that was because we were saying that these brand new specialists on their first step, the first step was so low that they were getting less than the most senior people that they were training. So it was a situation where your trainee was making more than you were, or where you were graduating into being a fully fledged specialist and getting a pay cut, which didn't make a whole lot of sense. So they tried to address that for those specific 3 years, but left everybody else high and dry. And if you look at the numbers, you can debate them, but they're somewhere in the range of, on average, 0.77% up to at most 1.5%. So they're not giving us anything like what we need in order to retain doctors. Right now, and I mentioned this before, any of us can get registered in Australia and go over there, and we with 15 years of seniority, we would be paid less than the new specialist with 1 year, just 1 year out of training. So our highest pay is lower than essentially their worst pay, and that's in the yeah, that's in the lowest paying state in Australia. So now, again, I'm not going to Australia. I'm not in this for the money. I've been in New Zealand 18 years because I think it's a wonderful place to work, and I love the patients of Northland. I love the work I do. But the issue still is one of, how do you entice people to work in a system that is so very badly understaffed? And it just, would Nicola Willis go to work in a factory that's missing 43% of its employees, and yet she's expected to make widgets just as fast as if they were fully staffed? You would never expect that. It would be really hard to fill that because it's so unfair. That's the situation we're in.
Chewie.
The 25,000 bonus is a one-off. They're essentially trying to buy off people in 4 areas, and that's it, just those 4 areas, even though there are many, many hospitals that have great difficulty recruiting doctors, more regions rather, that have great difficulty getting doctors. And so, I mean, they're trying to sort of divide and conquer a bit there. I get it. But, at the end of the day, the numbers speak for themselves. You do not have a health system that people want to work in. You have currently a health system that people want to escape from. And it is the kiss of death when you have now literally medical students planning on avoiding general practice, planning on avoiding these certain other specialties, and wanting to avoid working in New Zealand. That's fatal. And so for her to say, we put money into, or plan to train more doctors, very disingenuous, Ms. Willis. It would be preferable if you didn't just continue losing the ones you have. And the ones that are still here, that are working in the public system, you probably should try to hold on to them because they are keeping the system going. And specifically for Simeon and Ms. Willis, you don't make the public hospital system better by taking 10,579 surgical cases, giving that money to private hospitals out in the private sector. What you will see, what will happen, what is happening is surgeons and anesthetists and theater nurses are going to move out to follow that money out into private, and they're not going to come back. And Simeon knows this. I mean, he doesn't seem it, but he probably is on some level a smart man, and he probably has advisors with some knowledge of health, even though he himself has none except his anti-abortion and anti-family planning leadership roles that he's had in the past. Certainly his job at the bank didn't prepare him for this. But he has to understand that by privatizing and outsourcing all of these 10,579 surgeries, you will inevitably destroy surgery departments, departments of anesthesia, and your pool of theater nurses. Because once people move out into the private sector for easier cases that are cherry-picked, right? Only the simplest, most profitable things go out into private. People are not going to want to return to public. And so they are just, I have to believe that this is intentional, and I have to believe that it is an attempt to privatize things. It's along the same lines of private school vouchers, public-private partnerships, private highways and toll roads. Now we're getting into private hospitals, which is what Simeon wants us to do. I just have to look around the country and see that these rebuilds are being, the words they used was staged. So they're being made much smaller and broken down into delayed steps. They're building shells of hospitals rather than full hospitals, and they're staggering them out over time. And they're seeking that public-private partnership, which the international experience almost overwhelmingly shows us is profitable for corporations, but it shifts risk onto governments, and it saddles taxpayers with decades-long liabilities essentially you become a renter in your own land. You have a hospital, but it's not really yours, and your children will be paying for it. So that's pretty much what's happening in health. It's a brief and depressing overview. And to be honest, I think a lot of this is wrapped up in the strike. Why do you think nurses are coming out to support us in great numbers? Thank you, by the way. I had sonographers and midwives ask that I just give them a shout out, because they were some of the earliest and most avid people at the strike and the rally today. Why? Because they understand that we are in this together, that all the essential public services are equally threatened with the path government has chosen, and that's just purely privatization. It's here. It's the answer to all of our woes, even though most of these woes are self-inflicted, because we decided, and I don't mean we, government decided to set aside 19 billion to the people at the top of society rather than the rest of us.
I think I've waited too long for this joke, but I was going to make a joke, which was the $25,000. You know, it is sort of what Simeon Brown costs the country every 2 weeks. So that's not too bad of a trade-off, $25,000. Chewie, sir, you've been sitting there watching and listening. Jump in.
The question I have now is, where do the doctors go to from here? They've, fired a real shot across the government's bow. They've done something we haven't seen before, which is that 24-hour strike. What are the next steps?
Well, it could be a game of attrition. Like I'll just give you my personal opinion. With the budget cuts of 1.1 billion that are going to be that have been announced just a couple of days ago, things are going to get tremendously worse in the public sector, and it will feed throughout society. This is an austerity government. It's obvious. And as I said, they've given the money away. We just have to keep pushing them, and the doctors and all of us, that they could fix this problem tomorrow if they just reversed their giveaways. You don't have to keep doing this year after year. You can choose to get some of those billions that you have given away and put them back in the system. It's not too late. So what will happen in terms of doctors? I don't know. We will, I assume, keep striking. I think there will be generally lab workers, HCAs, and nurses that also strike. And then I think it will be increasingly adversarial. And I think eventually government will I don't know. They don't have any option. They painted themselves into a corner because they won't rescind their very badly targeted tax cuts. They won't admit their error kind of in anything. And so I think you're going to get showdowns across society and destabilization. At the bottom of it all is always the patient, who always gets hurt no matter what happens. When you defund and destabilize things, when you drop the health budget by 3% in real inflation adjusted per capita numbers, we've had a drop of 3%. And then you tell us that there's another 1.1 billion that has to come out of the budget. People are going to suffer. I think the rich will move in, and the desperate will increasingly move towards private health insurance. You're seeing that. I think this will be an unbelievable time for the private hospitals and the private imaging centers and the surgery centers and all the rest. It will be manna from heaven for them. And and you know what? Out of all of this, Simeon, if you look at the numbers, and I do hope you link with the stuff that I gave you, Simeon, if you look at the 2 years ago, 1 year ago now, and off into the future, it shows you that his salary is growing, the base salary, by roughly $10,000 a year. So life's not too bad for him. And I think until we have political movements and social movements that actually affect people like him, then nothing will change. Because he can tolerate, look, he's not the one waiting 2 years for a hip replacement. He's not the one with pelvic pain and bleeding. He's not the one anxious about a colon cancer diagnosis, desperate to see an oncologist. That will never be him. It will never be Luxon. It will never be David Seymour. They'll always have private health insurance and VIP service, even when they're within the public sector. And it won't touch them until we have to make it touch them. And yeah, I don't know. I'm going to spend whatever time I have still employed by Health New Zealand doing that on the days that I'm not working.
I just want to touch on one thing before we wrap up. And we've talked about the $1.1 billion less that Nicola Willis talked about this week, just so people are clear of what that is. This is a slide from Craig Rennie's podcast this week. We made this slide in the weekend because he's in Australia this week. And originally, as of the weekend just gone, the operating budget allowance was $2.4 billion. Now, Craig listed off all the things we have to pay for, basically showing that there's not enough in that $2.4 billion to cover all these things. That operating allowance is what's been stripped of another $1.2 billion. So now the operating allowance is $1.3 billion. And as you can see, $1.4 billion goes to health. So of $1.3 billion, there isn't enough to cover health, but if they put it all into health, other commitments, pre-commitments, including Pharmac, is not in there. Education's not in there. Defence, new money is not in there. No money for police to reach targets. No money for regional growth funds. No money for going for growth funds. So when we talk about another $1.1 million that's coming out of the operating allowance, and it means they do not have the money set aside or budgeted for any of these things they say they're going to do, because that comes out of the operating allowance, just so everyone's completely clear on that.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, that looks bleak. It looks horrendous. But I would also point out that we've got essentially monopolies in banking, monopolies in supermarkets, monopolies in the energy sector that's making 92% profits month after month. We've refused to go after tax fraud and corporate fraud. In fact, the government insists on wanting to lower corporate tax rates. We haven't gone after charities, even the ones that are absolute scams, churches that are actually businesses posing as churches. They've done literally nothing to go after the low-hanging fruit and make life easier for people that are trying to pay their rent and trying to afford groceries. So all of the numbers you see are not cast in stone. It doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. And one hopes that as things get worse, government will realize they have to make some concessions and undo some of the profligate transfer of wealth from the poor and working class to corporations, tobacco companies, you name it. Like I will feel sorry for this government and realize that their heart is in the right place when they tell me that they don't have any more hundreds of millions to give to tobacco companies. Until that point, I have no respect for I have no time to hear them say there's no money. You want money for healthcare or for anything else that's a necessity? Go back and get the 218 million from the tobacco companies, reverse all of that, and then we can talk. Then we'll know you're serious about negotiating with the doctors union or anybody else.
As we wrap up, Chewie, before we go anywhere, anything else you want to add in before we let people know about a little announcement?
No, I think Dr. Gary has once again laid a pretty devastating fire mission on the government and pointed out everything that the general public needs to know. Absolutely phenomenal work.
Gary, you said a bit earlier you were going to take the public service with you. You talked about the police and you talked about teachers. What you're talking about is people on the front line, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. So we're all in this together. Like, make no mistake about it. If if the entire public service is being assaulted, it's going to take all of us down with it.
Yep. And it's probably a good time for us to be able to say, for the past, couple of months, Gary and I have been talking about our next podcast to come out of Blindfish Media, and that is The Front Line with Dr. Gary Payinda. We are working on that right now. We are aiming to have it up and running pre-budget, probably fair to say around the week of budget is what it's looking like, maybe the week before. But Gary, welcome to the team. We'll be doing a weekly podcast where you have full control over the content, talking about what's happening on the front line. Do you want to say anything about why you want to do a podcast and what you want to do?
Well, I think being on your show a couple times and getting really good feedback from the audience who wants to know about these things has been transformative for me. Because as you know, like I've had a lot of media come to me for quotes on things, whether it's areas of my medical expertise, whether that's drowning or resuscitation or emergency medicine or whatever, or health politics and policy. But you can talk to them for 40 minutes and end up with a 4-second clip, and that's all that shows up, right? Just the juiciest tidbit, and it's kind of meaningless, and it's not how we should, function. And then I discovered what you guys are doing, where you actually have incredibly intelligent conversations and allow these experts like Craig Rennie to come on and really educate the public. So I think it's wonderful what you're doing. I don't see that there's a corollary to it in kind of mainstream media. You guys are small, but I think, like, I have 75-year-olds and 18-year-olds telling me in the supermarket that they saw me, and I always ask where did you see it, on a TV interview or this or that, and they'll say BHN. I watch BHN. And it's quite something when you have a show that transcends genders and ages and socioeconomic levels. So you're obviously doing something right. And I think it'll be nice that Craig is doing an economics focused show. That's absolutely essential and something you get almost none of in mainstream media. And it'll be nice to have a show about not just health, because I don't want to pigeonhole it just that much, because there's shared commonalities to all of the essential public services. And I think the issues at the base are the same for all of those. So I think it'll be a good chance to get people, and if you're listening and you're in the audience and you want to be on a show like that, and you want to speak to essential public services and your experience in them, and your ideas on how to improve things, and your ideas on what actual concrete actions and steps we can take now to make things better. Like, I want to hear from you. And Pat, you assure me that you'll be able to anonymize people, people's voices and people's identities during interviews, so that we can actually have frank and meaningful conversations on the show with intelligent people who are experts in what they do, right? No one knows the job of a healthcare assistant as well as a healthcare assistant. And and they're the one, these are the groups that are essentially voiceless, who could be telling us how to improve things, how to save money, increase efficiency. And that's my aspiration for the show. Who knows what it'll turn out to? Time will tell. We'll have to see. But the level of interest in BHN has been quite surprising and astonishing, just in the community. So it's pretty awesome what you guys are doing. You realize you're building something that could be, I don't know, you guys could be the future Rupert Murdochs and Fox News of New Zealand. But
there are
good way.
Dozens of us.
But in a good way, like kind of the opposite, the mirror image way of that. Yeah, I think you're doing good work, and I appreciate it.
When you started, and thank you for those kind words, the money's in the mail, the check's in the mail. I thought when you started off by saying you can talk to a media company for 40 minutes and they take 40 seconds, I thought you were going to say, and you guys are the opposite.
4 seconds.
I've only got, I thought you were going to say we're the opposite. I've only got 4 seconds worth of some stuff to say, but you guys drag it out over 40 minutes. So Either way.
Oh no, I'm just amazed that your audience like actually cares enough to listen to this. I mean, you know, I'm surprised and shocked when I get these emails back, or on my Substack when I get notices back of like, yeah, we watched that, and people are picking up on little things. You know, there's this interesting thing on there about doctors. You know, Simeon will say that we have tons and tons of leave, and then you'll read something about like the truth that we have, I think it's over 1 million hours of unused annual leave, because we find it so hard to take our leave and to leave our departments and essentially abandon them and abandon our patients. So it's quite fascinating that people are engaged and listening at that level. And it gives you hope that we can change things, because I think a lot of people, realize what's going on and want to see this going in a different direction. And you know, my best advice, like in a friendly way, to the current coalition government is listen to the people. Try to help the common people more. Try to help the people at the bottom 50% of the income distribution. You know, the so-called bottom feeders. Like, focus on those folks, because if you do good things for them, they will be loyal to your party and National Act and New Zealand First forever. So look after them. Don't like stop what you're doing. Take a different path. It's not too late. Change things, and you know, you'll be ascendant.
Gary, always a pleasure. And I'm sure you and I will be talking in the next couple of days as we count down to launching your podcast. And obviously, BHN whānau, you're involved. It'll be similar to Craig's in that it'll be on both, you know, Spotify, and it'll be on Apple Podcasts and other places, iHeartRadio, yada, yada, yada. But it'll also be on YouTube. So if you're watching right now, whether it's in live stream or not, and you haven't subscribed to the channel, perfect time to subscribe to the channel. Because this is going to be this platform on YouTube, right? Only on YouTube, not on the BHN Facebook page. We may start up with their own Facebook pages later down the track, but for now, the DOC Studios Facebook channel is where Gary's podcast will be in video format, if you want to check it out. So thanks, Gary. We'll keep talking. Appreciate you coming on. Well done on today. I know it's a bit of a strange thing to think about having to do this as such a bastard of a reason, but you guys stood up, and I think most of New Zealand stood up with you. So thanks for doing what you do, and we've got your back for as long as you need us. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, you're most welcome. I appreciate everything you guys are doing to keep the knowledge and the debate out there. It's essential, because if we let them get away with this, it's a one-way path. Like, it's a one-way path to privatization. You're not coming back from that for decades to generations. And so someone has to resist and say that there's a better, more humane way, more cost-efficient way as well. So thanks for doing what you do, guys.
All right, dude. We'll talk super soon.
Right. Cheers, man.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gary.
Bye,
all the best.